We're here today with Joy Jordan Lake. Joy is the author of the novels A Tangled Mercy, which was editor's choice of the Historical Novel Society, and Blue Hole Back Home, which won a Christie Award for Best First Novel. Among her nonfiction books are several exploring faith, racial justice, and adoption. Her first children's book was A Crazy Much Love, and this month she released another children's book called Sir Drake the Brave. Joy lives near Nashville with her family, and you can learn more about Joy and her books at joyjordanlake.com. So Joy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for the invitation, Brian. It's a real treat.
Yeah, so great to be able to talk with you again. But before we get into the new book, tell us a little bit more about your background and, the previous books that you've written.
Well, I grew up just being one of those people who just read and read and read voraciously, really shy kid. So books were just kind of where I hang out. And I loved hanging out with other kids who loved books. And I always wanted to write full-time, but just, came from this real practical, like a lot of us, you kind of have to figure out how to pay the bills. So I've done everything from, teaching sailing to waitressing at Pizza Hut to being a minister based in a church, serving homeless families to, oh gosh, you name it. And then being a college professor, adjunct college professor for years, which allows a little more time to write than some of those other jobs. So have loved teaching and writing for years. And then just over the past few years, I've been able to write full time, which has been great. But I have, I guess, 3 novels out, a 4th coming out next fall, and several nonfiction books. And they're and a couple of children's books, as you said. So it's all over the map. It's not it's never what I would advise at a writer's conference, because you should really, if you're trying to brand yourself, you should not be all over the map. But it's been a heck of a lot of fun. So there's that.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's good news and bad news, right?
Right.
Bad news, like you said, it's hard for people to kind of know who you are, so to speak,
Right.
and before you're known for 3 things, you kind of have to become known for one thing, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I'm always impressed with people's skill, that can do that, because there's such different genres, such different styles of writing, such different components.
There are, right. It's you kind of have to learn to shift gears and on the academic writing, you have one editor saying, I haven't done that for years, but back when I have an academic textbook out there, and or text used in academic settings, I should say. But on the one hand, your editor is saying, we need more gravitas here. We need more, and more footnotes, more, and then your editor on, of your novel is going, this is way too academic. Like, my current editor is always saying, take off the mortarboard,
That's funny.
quit, sounding like a college professor. So yeah, learning to kind of switch gears, and I don't always do it well, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So the new book I mentioned is called Sir Drake the Brave. What inspired that? How did that book come about?
That's been sort of in the works for any of us who've either raised kids ourselves or been, deeply invested in raising a kid, a grandkid, or godkid, or whatever. I know the godparents of my kids have been fabulously invested, but you're familiar with their bedtime fears. And my middle son in particular, who is this big, strapping, 6 foot tall, very tough guy now, 22-year-old, but as a little guy, just had a lot of bedtime fears. And he, we began to tell stories, and it became kind of a joke. He would say, what if a mean man comes to the door and offers you X, and it'd be something different every night, to let him take me away, and then I'd come back with, with a story about he could offer me this and this and this, and I would never, ever, but we would often use these kind of outrageous things that this mean man would offer. And so just over the years, it became this family story. And, the mean man would offer castles, and I've always loved horses. He would offer stables full of, horses and, servants to, and so anyway, there was that story. But over the years, writers groups are such beautiful things and so helpful. And one writers group I was in for children's writing years ago one person said, this whole mean man, like, I love the story, but and it's funny, and it's, a fun little over the top narrative, but wouldn't that be kind of scary? Like, might that create fears in a child who doesn't have those fears? Like, good point. So anyway, over the years, it turned into a dragon and a pirate and a, king with a knobby red nose. And anyway, we just had a lot of fun with who comes to the door and what happens from there. And then meanwhile, one of my dear friends here in Nashville adopted a little boy from Haiti who had to have his leg amputated below the knee. And at one point when he was a toddler, she just vented and said, there are almost no books out there with kids with prosthetic limbs or disabilities at all. And those that are limb different. She said that, like that's the point of the story. And so it's kind of boring to the kid. It's not exciting. They don't just be the hero of the story. Mm-hmm. And they happen to have something different about their bodies. And so anyway, I thought, So this book is a combination of the two little boys, my son and her son.
Wow.
So this is how the illustrator did it. And I have to give the illustrator a shout out here. Susan Edie is her name. And she does all her work in clay and then photographs it. And it's just extraordinary.
That is. What a process. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. Goodness. It's really extraordinary what she does. So
now did you pick the illustrator, or usually the publishing house does that?
Right. You're absolutely right. They don't like you to go out and pick your illustrator. They had already, Morehouse Publishing, also known as Church Publishing, is the publishing house. So Morehouse said, had already accepted the text of my manuscript, and they were looking at different illustrators, but they asked me, do you have anybody that you would love to work with? So that was a treat, because usually a publisher will ask you that, but really they have in their head, who they want, because they know the landscape better than you do. But in this case, they loved Susan's work. And Susan also lives here in Nashville, and I've just always admired her work.
Okay.
So that was a great treat to get to work with her.
Yes, I guess. A very unique approach to, the illustration.
It really is. It really is. If anyone's curious about that, I think her website is, you can find her at Susan Edie, EADDY, or claythings.com, I believe is her website. But it's just fascinating. She has lots of videos about her process, and it's gorgeous, gorgeous work.
Did Morehouse or Church Publishing publish your earlier children's book too, or how did?
They didn't. That one was published by Two Lions, which is an imprint of Amazon Publishing.
Okay.
Yeah. So
how did you get Morehouse to do this one?
Honestly, like a lot of things in life, I had a dear friend who works there, and I just kind of happened to mention to him, hey, I saw that y'all did one children's book. And is that something you're going to do again? Because all these, in general, what they produce are much more intellectual, theological books and all. And he said, yeah, we did. We really did. We did well with that. We loved it. Jennifer Grant, I believe, is the.
Yes. No, I've interviewed Jennifer about that book. Yeah.
I love her book.
They're outstanding.
It is.
You must be talking about Milton. Brasher.
Yes. Milton.
Oh yeah. So Milton is a good friend of ours too.
No kidding! He's the godfather of my children.
Oh my goodness! I had no idea about that relationship.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ginger. Yeah, they're old friends and very, very some of our closest friends.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. So he's spoken at several of my conferences.
Oh no kidding!
Yeah.
Right.
That's so wonderful to hear that you guys collaborated on it. I had no idea that you worked together with him on this book.
Yeah, it was a great treat. Usually I become friends with an editor later after you've worked together, but I've never been friends with an editor, I don't think, that then I got to work with. So that was a great treat.
And Milton came out with a book of his own earlier this year too. I interviewed him for that.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. I blurbed for that.
Yeah.
Early on, and along with a lot of other people, but I think that's my favorite of his books.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
So back to your book. As you said, the hero of the book is, a brown-skinned boy with a prosthetic leg. How, did you handle that? In terms of, the prominence in the story, of those different elements?
Right. No, great question. And we were aware of, you want to be very sensitive and, compassionate in dealing with that. It's not his prosthetic, his color of his skin is just part of who he is as the hero. We were very conscious of, in terms of who were the villains of the story, and, just trying to be conscious of, as we all should be more. And so I hired several cultural sensitivity readers just to
I was just going to ask you about that. That's great. And then
Yeah.
really a wise choice, I think, to do that.
Yeah, they were terrific and had good suggestions. So we ended up just, we changed one of the pages, but, and changed some wording and all. So I do think I'm always grateful whenever, in fact, my novels also now go there. There's always something, because I like to deal with historical novels. And so, it's just important to have other people read it and give you feedback, because you can, especially as a middle-class white person, you can miss something. You can, something can be worded in a way that ought to be reframed. So anyway, I'm always grateful when a publisher says, hey, we're thinking about hiring this person. It's like, yes, please. That's awesome.
Well, none of us can have, a 360-degree perspective, right? I mean,
Right.
we all got blind spots, and, it's important to try to backfill for that wherever we can.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So, clearly there's plenty of children's books out there, and plenty that, encourage kindness like yours does, but how does yours differ?
Well, it's a couple of different ways. I think partly just the fact that, for example, his prosthetic limb is never addressed directly. This is a little boy who's just dealing with bullying, which, all kids do at some point, right? And we as parents or guardians or grandparents or godparents trying to help kids find their own power through kindness, through confidence, through being able to speak back and being able to act. And this little boy is I love him, and he manages instead to insist on his own boundaries, and yet eventually bring these people, these villains, into the fun and the exuberance of the story. And it's framed too that I think so often we're not doing a kindness to someone who treats us poorly by allowing them to do that. And so that's part of the without being pedantic or preachy, part of the message of the story is that not allowing people to be bullies is part of the kindness, and sort of freeing them up too from what the poison they're enacting on themselves. But on one of the last pages too, we included my oldest child is young adult child is a child and adolescent therapist in Chicago. And she included a page of helping caregivers help kids with bullying, with nighttime fears, with that kind of thing. So there's just a whole page of just kind of bulleted, here's some helpful hints that I would have found. So I wish I'd had those when my kids were little, and I felt like sometimes I was just kind of paddling through trying to figure out, well, that didn't work. So anyway, I think that's a real treat. And it's just a fun book. Again, thanks in large part to Susan Edie's just over the top, really fun illustrations. Because, we've all read those kids' books where it's like, it's important that Johnny recycles, and that's an important message, but it's, those aren't always fun. And so this book is kind of an exhilarating ride, which I hope kids will find just, one of those books they want to go back to again and again.
Sure. So since you're right in the heart of, Music City, USA area down there in Nashville, are there any music influences in your writing?
Lots in novels and in children's books. Oh my gosh, songwriters. I was just out to dinner a couple of nights ago with a couple of them who are longtime friends. And, to be able to distill into 3 minutes an entire story arc with, kind of the sounds of poetry. And I mean, it's just such an amazing skill. And I think those of us who write other things have a lot to learn about. For me, for example, I cut my teeth on and did my doctoral work on 19th century fiction. And while I still love that, I have those tendencies just go on and on and on and describe a tree for 3 pages. And so songwriters are just such a great tonic for me to be able to how do you distill that kind of emotional power into 3 minutes or into a chorus or into, so that's been great. And especially with children's books, the sound of the language is so important. You want that rhythm, even if it's not rhyming, you want the sounds that are fun, that go together. You want, maybe some alliteration, or you want it to sound musical, so that's been a real lesson to me, to get to learn and learn the stories behind how these people do what they do. They so often, in fact, Milton is one who's written a lot of songs over the years. And for those writers, collaboration is, I think, sort of the norm, so you sit in a room together and you brainstorm. And so often for those of us who are other sorts of writers, it's very lonely. You sit in a room by yourself, just you and your laptop and with your dog, if you're lucky, and so it's good for me to learn to sometimes collaborate, even if I'm writing separate books, to learn that it's always to my benefit if I get together with any other kind of writers, creative people. I always learn a lot. So in the kind of conferences that you do, I mean, those to me are just invaluable. Not only the plenary speakers that inspire you, but just standing out in the hallways or getting a cup of coffee with people. It's just absolutely invaluable.
There's a really excellent book that I suggest to a lot of people called Where Good Ideas Come From. And it's like a historic analysis of, kind of the sociology behind innovation. And in the book, it talks about several of the things that you basically just touched on, that kind of the random connections that we have, informally in different places where we tend to, meet other people and interact, is where most good ideas come from.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. Marcus Hummon was one of the writers behind God Bless the Broken Road, if you know that song.
Sure.
And I heard him one time tell the story of being at a bar with a couple of friends, and one guy's talking about his alcoholism and how horrible it was, and it destroyed his marriage. And it's, it was just this horrible, horrible many years. And yet he started this new relationship, and it's so beautiful and so life-giving, and they're about to get married. And he just said, so all I can tell you is God bless the broken road. And the other two guys standing there, Marcus Hummon and another guy, immediately said, that's a song. Can we use that?
Wow. Wow. That's very cool. That's a great example.
Right. Exactly. Of creative. Sometimes the ideas just kind of drop down in the middle of the story.
So we mentioned earlier that, your new book is published by Morehouse, a division of church publishing. Are there any theological angles to the book?
To me, there really are, because it's, Tony Campolo, back in the old days, if you remember that name, the speaker who, had an influence on a lot of us who are of a certain age, had one of his set talks that he did about, sort of the more the power, the less the love, the more the love, the less the power. But that sort of sense of, when power really can, it's very Shakespearean, right? Power corrupting, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We all learned in high school studying Shakespeare, but that sense of wanting in all of us to control, or wanting to not feel insecure. So we're going to, and how do we respond to bullying, whether it's on a political level, whether it's on a personal level or a family, and how do you not respond with the same sort of descend to viciousness or descend to revenge or descend to whininess or, just all the sort of unhealthy directions any of us can go. And trying to think through, to me, a lot of the best children's books, really have powerful messages for adults as well. And I think that's one reason, we as adults tend to pull
Oh,
those books.
absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
no question about that.
Right. And, in this case, just that sense of, for me, a lot of my family of origin and my extended family over the years have both become more and more diverse over the past years in every way you can imagine. And while those there have been some growing pains in that process, it's been so beautiful and so life-giving. And the more diverse we've become, the more joyful we've become, and the more inclusive and the more fun, honestly. I'm gonna get all teary just talking about it. But I mean, it's been really, it's been really a lesson in the more you open the doors and the longer you make your table, um, the love just grows and grows and grows. And so I think that's partly what I wanted to communicate in this book too, was this sense of meeting meanness, or meeting kind of that bullying, meeting the closed-minded, just some more controlling, power hungry, whatever, but meeting the bullies at the door and just, not putting up with it, but it becomes, but you're welcome at our table, if you want to if you want to join the party, if you want to be kind and thoughtful, and you want to be, come on in,
Interesting. Wow.
welcome to the party. And it's just been, so anyway, it's been fun to watch in our family, and very, a great lesson in human beings. A lot of times we act out of fear ourselves, just from, fear of change, or fear of, fear of tomorrow, fear of our own worst tendencies, right? And whenever we're acting out of fear, it's usually going to come out in unhealthy ways, as opposed to just kind of this open-armed, come on in. So come on in.
Well, that's, just so much, harkens back to, Martin Luther King's statement about, the only way to lose an enemy is to make them your friend.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. I think we could just kind of go through the day quoting Martin Luther King Jr. and just,
There you go.
if we could just figure out a way to just have that constantly scrolling in front of our faces, we'd all be better people.
And that's the truth.
Yeah.
So, you're obviously a very creative, productive writer. Are there new things on the horizon that you can talk about, or is it too early?
Well, I don't think it's too early to talk about this project right now that I'm have a deadline for soon for kind of edits, but it's in production, or headed into production. But it's this one is a mystery set on the coast of Maine. I don't know if you've ever been to Maine, or
Sure.
yeah, it's
Beautiful, rugged coast.
gorgeous, and I used to live in Boston for years, and so Maine was the kind of Kennebunkport area was sort of an escape place when we would go up and with our 50 cents in our bank account, try to find places to stay. And so I've just always loved that area. And this is a fictional town, but anybody who's been to Kennebunkport would kind of recognize the layout of the town around the harbor and that sort of thing. So it's a for anybody who's a Louise Penny fan. I don't know if you know her, the mystery writer, but I'm so intrigued with her. With that sort of mystery writer, it's not as much about who done it as why done it. Kind of what is it about human psychology? What is it about holding in that hate and bitterness towards someone else for a long period of time that transforms who you are inside, And so anyway, she's just to me, she's fascinating theologically too, kind of wherever she is in terms of faith or not faith. She's so interested in different people's perspective on, is there a God, and what does forgiveness look like? And, those sorts of existential questions, and what happens if we're unable to forgive? What happens to us inside? And so anyway, that's the sort of mystery that I hope it's a fun puzzle, but I also hope it's more of those kind of that interesting, and also just the fun of kind of that small town beauty and quirky characters. And but it's set in 1950, which I think for a lot of us triggers like, oh, Happy Days, like sock ops, and but really it was such an interesting time in terms of you're just coming off of obviously World War II, and you've got all that sort of shifting of what are women's roles, coming out of the workplace suddenly, a lot of women losing jobs that they really enjoyed, or in some cases relieved to be leaving, but just that shifting of roles, a lot of racial conversations that are getting ramped up at that point, just a lot of really important conversations that are either still still sort of just boiling under with the lid on, but about to come out. So in some ways, I think almost more interesting than the 60s, when the lid starts coming off of that, some of that stuff. All those conversations are still there. It's just it's just a little bit more under the surface. So anyway, and a lot of still fallout from World War II. One of the main characters has sort of disappeared during the war, and so anyway. So
well, let's make sure when that book comes out that we do another interview, so you can tell us more about that.
Oh, thanks, Brian. I'd love that.
Well, Joyce, pleasure to get to speak with you again, and congratulations on the new book. And as I said earlier, you can find out more about all of Joy's books at joyjordanlake.com. So Joy, thanks so much, and congratulations.
Thank you, Brian, and congratulations to you on all these wonderful conferences. We need more of that in this world, so thank you for putting those on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, but thank you.